for Twitch to catch on that we're streaming. There we are. We're streaming. I guess I'll tell the world. I'll go ahead and just make sure my audio levels aren't too terrible. Well, everything looks okay. Let's post. Streaming game dev. Doing underwater stuff. Burping straight into the mic. So I may or may not have somebody call me about gas in the next half hour or so. So if I suddenly sign off, it's because I had to deal with some explosive situations. There's no risk of explosion. It's the opposite. Some idiot screwed up the gas and I don't have any. How fun. So this is where we left off. In case you have forgotten, we spent most of Saturday trying to figure out how to put together this, which is running really slowly for a moment. There we are. Seems to have worked itself out. There's our fish bolus. Oh, we got another. I wonder what those jaggies are. Maybe I'll spend today doing a little bit of analysis. And we got some fronds here. So the basic setup for all of this is dependent on level design. But here's the issue. Apparently, in the newest version of Unity, which is 2019.3b, there are terrain holes. And that's actually, like, a really big deal. So I was gonna spend today doing some level design, but I'm not sure that I want to do level design when there are when there is going to be such a big change to my level design tools in the near future. I might do some optimization today instead. What really gets me is how terrible this camera is. I'm really confused as to how I managed to make it jaggy, because it shouldn't be possible. I mean, it's not doing anything. All I can think of is that it's too closely tied to the player's rotation. And since we are we doing base rotation? We might not be. If we're doing base rotation, that could mean that the animation itself is just a little bit jaggy and it's combining. Let's take a look. So here's the player. Here's our diver animations component. No, we're not applying root motion. Here's the camera gimbal. So if we take and we hit play, the camera gimbal remains attached to the player, as you can see. As I move it, oh god, it's so like ragged. I don't know if you can feel that on Twitch. It doesn't feel like it's being updated every frame. It feels like it's being updated every like fourth frame. And when I'm turning, I don't get a nice smooth turn. So what I'm thinking about doing is lerping the camera gimbal to smooth it out. So what that would be is that would be another object between the camera gimbal and the character. Let's try it. So the basic idea here is that we've got a camera gimbal here, and we're going to put in another empty object, which we'll call a slosh gimbal. And we're going to just drop the camera and the underwater audio straight into the slosh gimbal. And what we'll do is we will do an align 0, 0, 0 with our controller. So to do that, we'll go over into scripts. We're going to create a new small scripts. What do you want to call it? Helpers. A lot of the scripts we've already got are helper scripts, but we're getting large enough that we need a dedicated directory for them. So the helper scripts are just going to be really, really basic scripts. Lerp to parent. And all I'm going to do is every update, I'm going to set our position and our location to what it was last frame, and then lerp towards what our parent has. So for that, we're going to have vector3 last pause and quaternion last rot. And up here in start, we say last pause equals transform dot position, and last rot equals transform dot rotation. Oh, good. More updates. I'm not sure why that's underlined in purple, but whatever. Or not purple, but red. I didn't spell anything wrong. Oh, I didn't capitalize it. Well, that's fine. All right, so here in update, we're going to do that at the end. But at the beginning, what we're going to do is set our position and work it out. So transform.position equals vector3.lerp last pause, comma, transform.parent. That's not how you say it. Transform parent.position. Time.delta time times speed. We'll go ahead and define speed. Public float speed equals equals 5. We'll just take it 3. 4. 4 is fine. And then we'll give it a range of 0.5 f to 10. And then we're going to do the rotation as well. So transform.rotation equals quaternion. I think we want to do it rotation second, just so that we don't risk. Yeah, this should be fine. So then we'll just do quaternion.slurp, last rot, and transform.parent.rotation. And then again, time.delta time times speed. It's that easy. When I say that it's a basic script, I certainly meant it. The only question is whether or not this is actually going to be any help at all. I am absolutely not assured of that, but it's not a big deal if it turns out to fail. Just wasting 2 or 3 minutes of our time, no biggie. So, as you can see, what we're getting is an even worse jitter here. See that? That's so weird. Is there some kind of frame interpolation going wrong? So let's take a look here. At the camera gimbal, we use something called a player camera script. I'm going to go ahead and move that to the back of the execution stack. Is it under preferences? It used to be right here, didn't it? I guess they probably just changed where it is. I haven't had to do it since 2018, the version, not the year. No. Ah, there it is. They just hid it away a little bit. So here we've got our stuff. This is a lot of stuff that gets set up automatically, which we don't really have to worry about. None of this stuff is at all interesting to us, but we have to add our player camera. So we'll just go ahead and, oh, for some reason typing P doesn't help. Oh, okay, wow, it's not a filter. It just kind of, that's not great. Whatever. There we are. So now our player camera happens last, and we'll just go ahead and hit apply there. The post-process volume is something that we can just leave there. And we don't need the mesh renderer either, because it's not there. Just making sure that we don't have anything here that I'm going to be surprised by, so we're going to remove some of this crap. Yeah, so there's nothing else on this camera gimbal that's giving us issues. Oh, I have to turn off the update script I created, because obviously that's going to screw everything up. There we go. That might have fixed it. We're still getting a tiny bit of jitter here, but it's definitely way, way better. All right, so the script execution order was the problem. My guess is that what was happening is that our inputs would tell it to rotate in a certain way and focus in a certain way and tilt in a certain way, but that would happen before the character movement, the player movement here. So the player's core quaternion would move, and then the camera would slightly tilt and slightly jitter, because the animation of the main player was happening in a different order That's my guess. I'm definitely getting something that feels more like the proper frame rate now. I'm still getting occasional twitches, but I'm not sure that that's the camera anymore. If it's occasional like that, it might be something that we just have to look into our analysis tool here. Here we go. I'm going to put it off. Where is it? There it is. It's hard to tell which of the tiny the tiny gray lines is the one I need to click on. I'm just going to see what our frame rate is. I'm going to try not to sneeze straight into the mic here. Yeah, so I'm looking at our frame rate and whether or not it ever drops, and it certainly never drops below 60, which is good, because this is not a very big level. If we're getting down to 60 already, we need to do some optimizations. I'm not seeing any real jitter at all. Yeah, so this, I mean, I'm looking over on the left. I can't actually see whether the camera is jittering on the actual screen here, but on the left, there's no wobbling at all. It's a pretty flat little graph. But no, it actually seems to be mostly resolved. The problem is that I'm not really an expert at this, and my my sort of visual acuity is not very good. So sometimes I think I might invent a situation or see something that's not actually there, or see something that used to be there just because I'm used to seeing it. So it's difficult for me to do this sort of thing without thinking about it. But just so you take a look here, aside from this one moment where we shut the game off, the rest of this was just a flat line exactly like this. This spike here is us shutting it off, so it hardly counts. I don't think we can scroll backwards. I think it only records a certain amount of time before, yeah. So I can't show you, but it was all just this. It's no big deal at all. If we actually want to take a look more in detail about what we're seeing here, the green is the rendering and the blue is scripts. And you can see that our scripts are really pretty aggressive, and they're all particle scripts. That's to be expected. We're using what is colloquially known as a shit ton of particles. And that's probably going to get worse. I may have to switch out the particle renderer for a custom GPU instancer. Yeah, that's not a terrible plan. It's not that difficult to do because the way we've been handling it so far has been agnostic, particle agnostic. We're tracking all of the relevant details ourselves, so it doesn't matter if we have to replace the particle renderer. We'll just swap in a custom renderer of our own choosing. Now, what I'd like to do is, I really do want to work on level design. So fundamentally, one of the biggest challenges about underwater games is making the levels feel interesting without feeling empty or crowded. Because it's easy for someone to, you give the level a lot of stuff or stuff like that, and it feels really claustrophobic and confusing. So there's a balance to be had between an openness and yeah, look, there's jitter. You see that jitter? Is that just animation jitter? You know what? It might just be animation jitter. Oh, that explains it. So what we're doing here is we're actually lerping between two blend trees in our animation system, and it's just causing a tiny bit of jitter as the lerping is based on the amount we hold left and the amount we hold right. So as we change the amount that we're holding left or right, or as the input lerping happens, we end up getting just different animations get pulled to the front. And that's also true at the forward and the backwards, because those all have custom animations. Okay, that's something I can deal with. I may have to decouple the camera from the player object. We'll see. I don't think so, though. I think these are strictly limited to the actual flapping of the fins and stuff. No, we're definitely getting some background jitter too. We're definitely getting some hitches in how the background is rendering. It's not just the player character. Anyway, what I was saying is, you want to have a variety in your level, but you never want the player to feel like they're being pressured in a way that they're uncomfortable with, because the whole point of a diving game is here's this bug. I'll figure it out someday. You see that? That right there? That giant slowdown? That's what I was wondering what was happening. Don't really know what it is yet. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. The point here is that what we're seeing is we have a couple of options as to how to build the levels, and it's difficult for us to choose how to build these without knowing what sort of interactions the player is going to have, because we would like the player to spend some time in nice relaxing open areas and some time in claustrophobic cave areas, but we don't want them to just get shunted from one to the other arbitrarily. We want them to move around as they see fit, and a big part of that is going to be the mission objectives that we set up. Now, the mission objectives, we've been working with them in the past. We've already got a fully functional mission system. I think it's just turned off right now. We could turn it back on and just kind of play around with it a little bit, see what sort of stuff we're doing. We may as well try to figure this out, but there's one big problem with this particular setup. This level right here is a test garden, and it's just garbage. I just threw it together because I needed to test some stuff. It has no layout that's good, nothing interesting about it. The worst part about it, however, is that there's no open space. If we turn down here into this ravine, you might think it's going to turn into open space, but it doesn't. It remains a really pretty tight ravine all the way through. And that's something where we're going to want to have a more relaxing sort of area for part of the setup. So I think what we should do is create a new level element. So right now we've got several level elements. We've got level prefab number 1 here, which we can just turn off. And we got level prefab number 2, which doesn't actually contain all of the stuff that that's in this level, because the fish bolus, the fish planter, all of this stuff is in that level, but it's something that's not currently set up right. What we're going to want to do is save those as prefabs, because we don't want to have to pull them in and out of the level all the time. So we'll just create a tools, and we'll just drop some of this in there. Here's our fish bolus tool. Here's our flat planter tool. Here's our seaweed planter tool. And then we can drop these into the level prefab. What's this? That's nothing? Something? Right. So this is our second level prefab, and basically all we need to do really is turn it off. It's gone. And with that turned off, we're left with almost nothing, but there is one thing that was taken away with that level prefab that we want, and that is the water. So we're going to drop the water into the tool set as well. And we're going to want to the card, fog card. It's already in here somewhere. Oh, I've been putting them in the wrong place. Hold on. Just move this directory to our prefabs instead of some plugins prefabs. That was annoying. Go away. Oh, so there's our fog card. Just put that here for now. All right, so with that all in mind, we can just pretend that these levels don't exist and create a new one. So I'll hit play just to make sure nothing is terribly broken. No, it looks correct. We're all floating in a blue void of nothing. There's our buddy, also floating in a blue void of nothing. And the only things we have on us are a generic sun and a generic directional light and spotlight that I don't know why these are here. Oh, this is the underlighting. Yeah, let's go ahead and just add that to the sun for now. Well, let's go ahead and put it up here. Call it underlight. And then here's a spotlight, which I was just doing testing with, so we'll get rid of that. And then most of this stuff is cube. That's definitely a cube. Just delete that. The player is going to be the same. The buddy is going to be the same. Yeah, so this is all we really needed at the moment. Let's go ahead and create a new level element. And what we're going to do is have the same basic setup that we did before. And that's going to be involving creating a new terrain. Now, one of the things I was thinking about was making the terrain a prefab. The problem is, I think that the terrain uses like a shared terrain map, so that if I were to clone this, it would edit both at the same time. I think I remember that. I see the terrain data here. So if I was going to duplicate this, I would have to clear out the terrain data. And there's no new option here. Well, we'll go ahead and just create new terrain. It's no big deal for us at the moment. Now, one of the problems I have is that the terrain is going to change in the near future. There's not only new tools, but things like putting holes in it. But for now, we'll just use the same old terrain. There it is. Now, the terrain is currently not in the right spot for us. Just go ahead and move it. Looks like it's a 500 meter shift. There we are. So now at 0, 0, 0, we have this terrain, but we don't want it to be at 0, 0, 0, because that would mean that we wouldn't be able to go any lower than this. If we take a look at how we lower and raise... Oh, this is different. Apparently I have the new terrain tools. Interesting. I didn't expect this. So if we try and lower it, you can see it's not getting lowered, and that's because 0 is the floor. What we really want to do is set the full flatness to a specific height. Set height. And what we'll do is we'll set the height to, I don't know, 100. But the thing is that this is a really, really dense terrain field. I think it's much larger than I need. I certainly don't need the full 600 height. I only need like a 200 height. So if we bring this, where's the height? Here it is, 200 is fine. Sorry, since this is new, I'm sort of thinking about it and just glancing over it to see if I see anything else. And a lot of this is new to me. I don't know whether it's just because I'd never noticed it before or what. Anyway, we're going to set it to 100 and hit flatten all. And what that'll do is it'll create a very flat surface for us, and we'll be able to push down or up. But the problem is that we want 0 to be the height of the sky. So that means we actually want this to be at negative 100. So now 100 is exactly square with 0. And what we'll do is we'll drop the terrain into the level, and we'll also drop in our thing we just created, the water, like this. And you can see how small the water is in comparison to our tile. That's just to show you the difference between the size of the old terrain element I was using and the size of the new terrain element. I think this terrain element is probably still too big. It's got quite a bit of size to it. What is it, like 1,000? Yeah, that's just too many meters. Let's go ahead and make it 500. Movement in an undersea area is substantially slower. That's not the one I wanted to change. Than walking, than running or driving a car. So and the view lane is also much lower, so we can have a smaller element. But this needs to be increased in scale. There we are. That'll allow us to see underwater areas all the time. Now we're just going to want to set up a nice conduit here, or a nice area for us to play around with. So for that, we're going to use this set height again, and we're going to set the height to, let's say, 80. And then we'll change our brush to something interesting, I guess. I'm glad the brush size has a new max, and it's quite nice. What? I'm telling it to set... Didn't I set it to 100? Wasn't that what I did? I must have flattened it back down to 0 when I changed the density. That's okay. But that's no longer square with the ground. That's weird. What happened? Huh. Not really sure why it's doing that. That's okay. We seem to have solved it. We'll work it out later. 20 meters is actually quite a bit deeper than you might think. But one of the issues I have is that I can't really see anything happening here. I told it to set this at 20 meters, and it's not doing shit. Interesting. So does this not work with the set height? Then why is it an option? I mean, if this is the extent of their new tools, something that doesn't work, that's dumb. Okay, so the height is currently set to 200. So 100. Flatten. It's still set to 200. I can tell it's still set to 200 because this is 200 meters below the surface. So this doesn't work. So set height doesn't work. You rolled out your new terrain tools to people who didn't update. And set height doesn't work? What the fuck is this? I can't work with this. Well, this is really dumb. Okay, so now set height is working, but it's setting it to 200. Why is it setting it to 200? This is clearly not 200, it's 0. Okay, so now I'll set it to 0. Okay, so now I'll set it to 200. What? Now I'll set it to 100. Now I'll set it to 65. This is a fucking percent. Why is it a fucking percent? Okay, well, now that I know that it's a percent, maybe it'll work. No, that's not... That's not 100 high. I'm very confused. Let's create a cube. Here's our cube. We'll go ahead and make it large. And we'll set it at 0, 0, 0. And you can see how that's down here on the area. If we set it to 100... Okay, so this is actually at 50 above 0. Why is it measuring from world coordinate? It's measuring from world coordinate. Why would you do that? I'm going to have to paint the whole thing and then manually move it down and then not ever paint it again. Well, let me just whine on Twitter about that. Well, Unity 3D. automatically updated my terrain tools, and yay, thanks, but maybe test them first. Set height is relative to world height, not terrain object height, and therefore cannot be meaningfully used when you're trying to do subaquatic terrain. Alright, but now that I figured it out, I can at least work around it. Who knows, maybe they will unroll another patch without asking me and fix the problem. Won't that be nice? Anyhow, since we have to do it above ground, we're going to go ahead and use 100 as our setup point. We'll turn this water on and bring it up to 100 as well. No, that's rotation. There we are. And then turn it back off just in case it interferes with the brush. Alright, so now maybe we can get some friggin' work done. So, yeah, that's more like it. So the problem simply was that this was using world coordinates, and I was expecting it to use something, you know, meaningful, like local coordinates to the terrain, which is how it's always worked in the past. Anyway, here you can see that we're going to just rough out kind of a flat area for ourselves, like so. I am not 100% sure about whether the player is actually compatible with being above 0. I believe that I may have actually made everything assume that 0 is the surface of the water. Let's go ahead and drag this character up and find out, I suppose. Well, it doesn't seem to be erroring. Let's turn on the surface. Oh, the surface is all errored out. Because the surface's shader assumes that it's 0 is the surface of the water. I can probably just tweak that. Here's our top water shader. Clear range, frequency, magnitude, frequency, magnitude. Let's open it in a shader editor. Wait for 10 or 15 minutes. Here we go. So here's water height, which is currently a constant. All we really have to do is switch it over to a property. That's it. So now that water height is a property, we can set it to 102 instead of 100 or 0. The reason there's a little extra 2 meters there is simply because otherwise it gets a little bit aggressive. But that's pretty good. That's what I want. Now, if we were to swim over to one of these edges, you can see how this is a very soft beach-like situation, where it seems like we'll just be able to go right up onto the beach. And obviously that's not something we want to recommend to our users. So this is not what we want our users to feel like we're, you know, letting them do. But you can see how the water is actually directly on that 0 line. It might actually be hard to tell because the shader is kind of confusing matters. But I'm pretty sure that is directly on top of it. It's within a couple of centimeters at the very least. But what we need to do is take this terrain and do a little bit of different editing. So instead of set height, we're going to do raise and lower terrain here. And the reason for that is simply because we not only don't want this super flat terrain, we also don't want it to feel like you can go up the sides of these cliffs. So we're going to raise the cliff terrain here, so it has a little bit of an edge to it. I guess we'll increase the opacity and lower the brush size. Yeah, it's more like it, like that, yeah. And then we'll lower that opacity right back down, and we'll start to maybe use a different brush and just create some roughness on the ground here. Now the basic idea is that you want to make the edge high and the center low, because that's how reality works underwater. But it doesn't have to be much of a difference. It's not like the edge has to be super high and the center has to be super low. It just has to be enough to give you a little bit of variation. We're going to take a look here. Yeah, we're going to switch over to soften. I don't actually want that either. Stamp. I'm not sure what stamping does. Interesting. Okay, so that turns the brush into a stamp. That's cute. None of the brushes are suitable for that. These are all brushes that are built as brushes, not stamps, but that's not too bad. I guess we'll go back into raise and lower terrain and just decorate the edges a little bit more aggressively. Let's make sure that we're not screwing anything up, though. Let's take a look at how it feels. So you can see how it's much, much larger than it first appears. Although our terrain map doesn't seem really, really deep. It didn't really seem like it had a big dent in the middle. In reality, it has a tremendous dent in the middle. And you can see how soft this terrain is. This terrain's softness might feel like it's too soft, but that's because you're used to above ground terrain. And I've made a couple of videos about this. The truth is that we don't want our hardness to come from the terrain height map. We want our hardness to come from meshes. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to set up. And basically, this is just a large flat area. And the question is, can you put a level into a large flat area and have it be fun? Well, that's the complicated thing about this, because we clearly have two lights. That's interesting. The complicated thing about this is when people are in a diving game, there are times when they want to be moving pretty quick, and there are times when they just want to enjoy themselves. And so what we want to do is we want to allow space for people to enjoy themselves. And then we also want to make it so that that space is not something that you have to always travel across. So what we'll probably do is put all of our level elements around the edges so that the player will stick close to places where there's a lot of natural terrain variation. And then going into the center will be like maybe something they can do or something that will happen at the very end. But the idea is we'll try to keep most of our interesting stuff to the edges where there's space for it. So if we go here into paint trees, and here's paint details, I'm not really sure where our is this? No. Where is the part where we can change it from a frigging checkerboard? How do I change? Oh, there it is, paint texture. All right. So here we can paint texture, but of course we have to create texture. Edit terrain layers. Create layer. Aha! Now they're calling them layers now, even though it's called textures. That's fine. So the layers are going to be something that we're going to be using to create the physical sense of this, this reality. And we're going to just choose some generic sand for starters. Got a lot of S's here. There we are, sand. Choose a nice bright sand. There we are. And then if we edit that, you can see how we can now add in a normal map and a mask map. Both of those are going to be extremely useful to us. This is much more powerful than the old version, which didn't have very many of these settings. For now, we're going to pick a normal map that makes sense for us. The only problem I've got with this is that I can't stretch the normal map. But we'll go ahead and choose this brushed metal normal, which should be roughly the same as what we would get out of the sand. The mask map is something I've never tried before, but what we're going to do is we're going to paint some sand in. And then we're going to try the mask map and see what it actually accomplishes. So we've got a couple of masks already built. Let's go down into our textures here. We got edge slanted here. We'll just drag that in. So this is our edge slanted map, and I don't know whether or not it affects when this renders or when it paints or what. This is not something... It doesn't seem to be doing anything. Oh, okay. So this actually gives us like a whole lot of extra stuff. This is not a mask map. This is a multi-channel mask, or multi-channel map. Unfortunately, it's only compatible with the high-definition render pipeline, which we're not using, and we don't ever plan to use. So we're just going to turn that off. I mean, I might use it someday, but we don't ever plan to use it in this game. So this map is not going to be of any useful to us. We can scale the normals, but we can't skew them. All we can do is make them larger or smaller, which means that I can't use a blue noise that's stretched. We can set the metallicity and the smoothness. You can have ourselves some real shiny sand. That's going to be very useful to us too. Yeah, okay. So what we really want to do is have a default here. Can we set this as the default? No, I guess not. Well, that's okay. We got a nice fat brush now. So we'll go ahead and just... There, now it's the default. And then we can create some new layers and go between them. Now, I know that there are some tools which will allow you to... What? Oh, these are like built-in layers. I see. Okay, so that one's the same one I just had, so we're going to delete that one. There's a darker one. Oh, what happened? What did I do? Oh, I clicked on this fucking thing. Yeah, stop being an asshole. All right, so now we've got a couple of kinds of sand here, but there's some more that we can add. We might as well add them all that we want to explore and figure it out later. This is not exactly the most descriptive set, you know. It's not exactly the most descriptive names for these things. Oh, well, here's a sea ground. Is this being automatically created from something, or did they actually include a sea ground layer with their default setup? That would be an unusually nice thing for them to do. They must be doing it automatically. I don't believe them. I don't believe that they would create a layer for something as specific as the undersea. I want a spotty. None of these are spotty. They really reduced the number of brushes that come built in, which is kind of a strange choice on their part, but whatever. So we're going to just go ahead and put in some stuff here. We're going to want another layer that is a rock layer. Rock lobster. Do we want color rock or drock or drock? This has green stuff on it. I'm not sure that's going to fly. it might not feel like underwater green stuff. It might feel like kind of surface green stuff. Let's find out. I actually have no idea where we are. Let's drag ourselves over to it so that we can tell where we are. Let's not drag our buddy, moron. We need to drag the player. There we are. We can just take a look behind us. Ah! Oh wow, that tiling is really egregious. Look at how awful that tiles. That's obviously not gonna fly. I could change the tiling, but I don't think it feels right. It's clearly a surface rather than an underwater sort of visual. I thought this tiling was an artifact, like it was overlaying the checkerboard still, but that's actually how it looks. That's not suitable. I don't know why that would be a default. I'm not sure that it is. I think it might be like changing these things on the fly. Oh, good. Look, I can actually just select these and see what happens. So this one is heavily textured, and this one is not. What is this one? It looks really, really flat and soft, doesn't it? I can't even see it. Oh, look at how tightly it's tiled. Again, it's like a super tight tiling. These layers come with specific tiling. They must. Yeah, look at this. A size 2? The default is 15. Why is it size 2? But even with that, it's still not going to work because it's just not the right type of rock. This one's probably the only rock that's going to fly. Again, the size tiling... Oh, hold on. They've inverted the tiling. I think that's what's going on here. So we used to have a tile size of 15, and now it looks like we're doing the opposite, and a low tile size is larger. Because this certainly isn't 5 times tighter than the one that was at 2. Now this rock isn't really suitable either, because this is not how it looks underwater. You don't get these white calcite streaks. But it's the best of the options that come with the default, so we'll keep it. Oh, we can also change it. What am I talking about? We can just come down here and select one of the other rock patterns. You can see we've got like rock A and rock blah, all that stuff. We actually want to search for something called tileable rock. If we take a look, the tileable... Oh, for fuck's sake. I just wanted to get close enough to see it, and instead it closed it down. This new obsession that websites have with, oh, you clicked somewhere vaguely not in my window, that obviously means you don't want me anymore, is super annoying. Twitch does it too. Whenever I want to export a file from Twitch to Blender, I have to be very, very careful to not accidentally drag my mouse across too much of the screen when selecting text. Because it will say, oh, you are trying to select this garbage name we defaulted you to. Obviously you want to close the window. It's like, no. No, this is like basic user interface stuff. Why do you have a little close button if everything closes it? Well, that's just me whining. So we're just kind of looking around here. And as I said, we want the tileable rock. Here we are. So if we take a look here, this is one of the tileable rocks. Here's another one. This one's really, really not suitable, though. And then here's one as well. I like this one because it's got some horizontality to it. This one is just fragmented and busted. I think that Tileable Rock C might be our best bet. The good news is Tileable Rock C also comes with a normal map. And you can see that that normal map ends up being... it makes the rock really pop. Maybe too much, but it's easier to pull back. So this feels like a cliff. Yeah, so you can see how the flat seeming surface has been transformed into something that feels like it's really rugged and nasty, even though it's just soft sand. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be using. You can go and do quite a bit with this sort of stuff, so that's nice. And we'll just go, and what I'd like is the ability to tell it to use this on everything that was, of a certain angle and stuff like that. And I know there are toolkits that allow it. I just don't know them, and I don't have them installed. So we'll just do it manually. It's no big deal when your levels are small. All right, and then of course we're going to want to break all of this up. There's just too many things that aren't quite right. So we'll add in just a little bit of this heavy wavy sand. Now you get this heavy wavy sand in areas where the water flows across, or the wind flows across. It's very different. This sort of sand doesn't usually show up in corners or anything like that. This is like desert dunes, if you want to think of it like that. There's got to be a lot of empty space and a lot of stuff, water or air, moving across the top. This darker sand is stuff that fits pretty well in the corners, but we're going to want to change this brush. I just wish I had a spotty brush. I suppose I could draw like a spotty texture, but I don't happen to have any drawn already. Do I? Let's take a look. I've got a pinhole mask. That's kind of like not exactly what I want. No. Okay. So I don't have one. We'll just make do. So with this smaller brush, we can go in and just kind of sand it up like this. But you can see why having a spottier brush would be nice. It's important to break up the stone a little bit. Now, in the long run, what we'll do is we'll break up the stone with other assets, mesh assets. We won't just break it up like this, because this is going to have soft edges that don't really make too much sense, but it should be okay. And then what we'll do is we'll just make our scale a little bit bigger, and then just generally break up the areas that are still a little bit too obvious. Is this sand shiny? That's interesting. I guess we'll see how that looks before we completely give up on it. All right, so let's hit play and see how it works. So here's our dune sand, and you can see that that's really pretty hypnotic. So the shiny sand should be right over here. You can see how big this area is. It's huge in comparison to what you might be expecting. It's really easy to accidentally make your terrain way, way too big. I'm only using like a quarter, maybe less than a quarter of this map, and it's already as large as an entire level might be. But of course our entire levels can't just be one big ball, one big empty bowl. We're going to have to do some other stuff, but the basic idea is here. So this is this shiny sand. It looks really weird. Let's go ahead and unshiny it. It's just too shiny. Why is it shiny? It's got a shiny set to 0. Why is it? Obviously, it's supposed to be wet sand, which is why it's shiny. But I don't know why I can't make it unshiny. That's really weird. Feels like it might be a bug or something that's not being shown. Just remove that layer and use a different kind of sand. Oh, look, this is a shiny sand too, isn't it? Yeah, okay, so both of these are shiny sand. We don't want them. Don't really know what the difference between these two is. I guess this one doesn't have a normal map, so we'll just remove it. There we are. So now we're down to 4 categories, which is kind of fine. As long as you know what you're getting into, it should be fine. One of the things that it might have been is it might be that... No. Okay, so I was thinking that it might be that if you have multiple layers, there's like some kind of weird bug where it'll do strange things, but that doesn't seem to be the case. All right, so we can go ahead and add in a little bit of rock here and there in the actual ground area. And the reasons for doing this are we want to use this rock as more of a marker than anything else, because it's not going to look like meaningfully like there's supposed to be rock there, but we can add just a little bit of rock to some of these edges, and when we come back later with meshes to put in, we'll know that those areas are probably intended to be rocky, and it's very easy for us to edit these rocks away if we decide we're not going to put meshes there. And if we do put meshes there, it'll fit better in with that surface instead. There we are. We'll just bring it back to the sand for a tiny touchdown. That's a little bit too much. Let's take a look. All right, so you can see that what we've got is an underwater terrain that has no distinguishing features at the moment. It's just a bowl. But by adding in a bunch of specific sort of terrain elements, just terrain textures, we've allowed ourselves to have a little bit of patterning to our bowl to make it feel like it's not just a giant universal mess. It's not just an endless pool of sand. But this is just very, very bare bones and minimal stuff. In reality, we're going to come through here and we're going to populate this area with rocks and seaweed and all sorts of stuff. The only question is, what sort of experience will the player have when they're moving through it? Because we can add enough stuff to make it extremely complicated, but we probably don't want to. We probably want it to remain feeling pretty minimal. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a rock blaster and blast in some rocks that are quite large. So to do that, we're going to want to go back into our tools. Boom. We got flat planter, fog card, seaweed planter. I think we can use the flat planter for this. No, it's a particle cannon. We need the other one. Let's go and see if we can rescue our boulder planter. Boop, 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 boop. Sprayer. Yeah, there it is. So we're going to drag this sprayer out into our level. We're just going to edit it so that it's a prefab. Call it a mesh sprayer. And we'll just drop that into our tools like so. Now this sprayer, it works the same as our various tools for... There we are. It works the same way as our various tools for trying to set up particles, but it predates them and it's not quite as nice. Basically what we can do is we can tell it to fire, and it will just shoot rocks along the forward vector like this. The rocks it shoots are from prefabs, but the problem is that once shot, they are no longer connected to the prefabs. How annoying is that, right? So what we really need to do is be careful to shoot rocks that are roughly correct, because if we change the prefabs later, it's not going to matter. And that means that some of the things we're going to have to do are change the prefab list here. So we've got rock A1, rock A2, rock A whatever. If we take a look, are these all from the correct directory? Yes. So these are the correct objects. If we take a look at the rock materials, however, these are bumped specular materials, and that's not actually what we want. What we want is the coral surfacer. this. So what we're going to have to do is go through and change these materials into the coral surfacer material. If we decide that we don't want that, then we're going to have to do it again. But the good news is these materials are universal. So if we spray rocks, even if they're no longer prefabs, we can change the material and it'll work fine. It's actually easier for us to clone this material rather than trying to convert these materials, which is why we're talking about it first. So we're going to go over into the Rock B materials section. Boom. And this is all in here. Oh, that's the mesh. That's not the material. There we are. So here's the rock materials that we're using, right? So what we're going to want to do is just replace all of the rock materials that we were doing. Terrain. So we got rock A material, rock B material, rock C material, these. But if we actually look at what the difference is by pasting in... No, I didn't paste. What a pain in the butt. All right, well, we'll go back. Sorry, I clicked off, and then it became a tremendous annoyance to try and fix it. Here we are. So here's rock. Here's rock B. This is the one that's got the coral surfacer. And the base textures that we're using for these are rock B and rock B diffuse, not the tiled textures. If we take a look at what our textures are, our materials are up here in terrain, we've already got rock A, B, and C materials. And they're highlightable. So these are not quite right. These are right. All right. So we've actually already done all the work. We just have to assign these materials to the rocks. And although it seems like I've been running around and doing nothing useful, in reality, I did have to do all of that to figure out that I had to put these rocks in the right spot, because these are not the right materials. So we're over here, and we're going to just drop in a different set of materials here. And to do that, all we have to do is select them. So see how we've got rock A, rock A, rock, whatever. We're going to go ahead and type in rock and pick the one that's actually mossy, like this. The mossy rock should automatically have the coral surfacer attached to it. So we'll just do it again here. This will be rock B mossy. And this will be rock C mossy. There we are. And now with this mesh sprayer should now spray, oh, not add component, just spray. Boom. Yeah. So now you can see that these are all mossy rocks, which was the goal. Later on, we'll probably tweak exactly how that mossiness shows up. But for now, all we really need to do is put the mesh sprayer into its own empty object so that all of our rocks are collected in one location. So right now, we shrink this down, and boom. Our scale curve looks like this, right? What we're going to want to do is actually edit this so that it has a value of 15. But we're also going to want to change the curve like this. Maybe this is a little bit too much. Yeah, there we are. Because we're trying for big rocks with this guy right now. So we've got a number 10. We're going to want to drop that down to maybe 4. And then we can just kind of aim for these rocky areas and populate them with rocks as intended. Can we scale these? Yeah. So we can scale this up so that it covers more space. Now what we should do is we should change this detail spray so that when we draw the gizmo, we actually get a feeling for where it's going to spray, because it's not giving us a very good idea right now. So to draw a wire cube, right now we're drawing it at vector 3, 0, and blah, 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 blah. What we actually want to do is draw another vector cube, which is at forward. No. And then that will be vector 3 1 times 2 plus vector 3 dot forward times 4. That should allow us to see where we're projecting. Not enough. Make that vector times 9. I'll make this vector times 20. And this is times 18. We can stretch it. So I'm trying to get this to feel right. But I don't need to spend too much time on it. I just need to make sure that I understand what's going on. Yeah, there we are. So now I can actually see where we're going to hit when we start to spray these rocks. Yeah. Now I can spray. Boom. And you can see that what we got is a radically different color of rock. And that's really the downside to having different textures like this. If we take a look, we're not changing the color of this rock. We're just using the built-in color. But the problem is, oh, there it is, a base color tint. So if I change the base color tint, it becomes a much grayer rock. Let's go ahead and try that. Let's set all of these to a gray tint, by which I mean a white tint, because that's how it works. And that's rock B, which is already set to white. Rock A is the one that's missing here. I'll just wait until I get one. So we're just going to shrink this a little bit and move it and try again. Populate. There's some rock A. Boom. Now the coral tint is also a little bit aggressive here, so we're going to just go select all of the terrain mossy rocks. We can adjust the coral tint for all of them at the same time. So by doing that, we can sort of get a feel for how the coral should look. And I think in this location, a yellowy coral would be the best bet. Maybe like that. We can also adjust the coral scale if we decide that we need it to be a little bit different, but I think that that's probably fine for the moment. The only problem is I think I just did that on like the far side of the map. So let's go ahead and do it on the near side of the map where we can actually see it. Yeah, that's not too bad. All right, let's see how that looks. All right, so here's what it looks like when I just spray rocks down onto the sand. Now, there's some good and some bad about this. The bad is that, as you can see, the soil around these rocks doesn't really sell the idea that these rocks are in the soil. In order to sell the rocks as being in the soil, I would need to have some kind of... that's interesting. Is there a lighting bug? Well, I'll figure it out later. I'd need to have some kind of... Oh, it's a coral height bug. That's something I can fix. I need to have some kind of like swell. I have to carefully paint around the edges of these rocks. For now, however, let's go back into that terrain texture and see if I can fix that, because the height is just a little bit too high on that. So if we take a look at the parallax scale, is that what we're trying to find? No, it's edge height. There we are. But really the issue here is that we've got these jagged edges. See that? That might be the noise threshold. Yeah. So the problem is that even as I change the noise threshold, that doesn't actually help at all. I don't want this, because this is obviously wrong. The problem is that it's, when I change the position of the vertex, it shifts it far enough to qualify as a different area of the noise field. So what we've got is basically the action of trying to make this pop off the surface has made it error out. It's not that terrible, I guess. We can work with it later. I'll figure it out. This is all experimental stuff that I was just doing to try it out anyway. What I want to try here is whether or not I can make whether or not I can make these feel like they are part of the ground by just using a really, really small brush and sort of trying to build up. The problem is I don't actually know whether or not this is going to feel right, because it might just feel dumb. But what we can do is we can hollow out as well, because that's actually what happens, is you get some that goes up and some that goes down. So we can sort of choose a direction where our sand will go up and then another direction where it'll go down, and try and make that feel realistic by actually putting in these kind of shadows where the sand builds up on one side and doesn't build up on the other. And that'll really improve the realism, but it's a lot of fucking work. So the question is whether or not there is some way to do this automatically. And I think that I am allowed to edit the height map, which means that I would theoretically be able to come up with some kind of way to do this. But it's a little bit, I mean, it would be just as much work, I think. Now the question is, I don't actually know whether or not that's going to feel realistic, but we can't use the texture that we're using here. This is not a good texture, just because it's a texture that implies there's a lot of space, and there's like a lot of stuff going across it and across the rocks, and that's obviously not the direction that the wind is going here. So we're just gonna block it in with another kind of sand instead. And then we'll soften it. I can try and soften it to imply the direction of the travel here. And then we'll just give it a little bit of face. All right, and we'll just soften this. There we are. So see what that sort of feels like. Now, obviously, we still haven't used any plants or anything, so this is just raw rock. So I don't know whether or not you actually know how underwater should look, but you see how this sand kind of piles up and then drifts down and away in a noticeable mound? That actually feels right to me. You can tell me whether or not you think that that's me bullshitting. But that is how it feels to me. I like that the sand feels like it is sweeping across these rocks in a fairly realistic way. I just don't like how much effort it takes. Also, it looks like my idea for using the mossy outcroppings isn't going to work, so we're just going to drop the edge height to 0. Because it's creating a lot of visual chatter, and it's not working out. Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to do about the mossy rocks. This is obviously not quite right, but I guess it'll do as a placeholder. You can see how the moss reacts strangely to our light. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. Well, that's all stuff that we can try and figure out later. I think we're going to reduce the parallax scale. It was a little bit too aggressive. But the basic idea for that seems to be, that's the sort of thing we want. Now the question is, can we create some nice particle effects? And the answer is, of course we can. That's why I'm here. What we're going to want to do is spray the particles with a much more aggressively controlled brush. So we come down to Tools and we bring out our flat planter. We can just put this in here. The flat planter, we'll bring it up so we can see it. There it is. And bring it over. So you can see that the flat planter has a very, very wide, by default, a very, very wide set of projections. But we can change that. We can just bring the FOV down. And you can see that this way we can sort of laser pointer our projections. And now the particles that we don't want 100 particles every time we fire the gun here. We just want like 8. And then we'll just go ahead and try and fill the underside of these with particles. Now we've got a problem, so let's clear this. And the problem is that our max deploy angle is too low. That's better. It was getting caught in the swell and being like, I don't know. Boom. Boom. All right, so let's just see whether or not that feels right with these particles kind of sitting on the lee edge where they're protected from the currents. Zero recorded, 0 in scene. 0 recorded. Oh. I think there might be a problem with making this into a prefab, but I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out in a second here. 6 recorded. Press play. 0 recorded. Stop. 0 recorded. This is happening because I made it into a prefab. Yeah. I don't know if I can unprefab it. This is obviously a terrible, terrible situation. I don't know why this particle system is refusing to survive me hitting play. This is the thing that has to survive, this positions here. But instead, it goes away, and then it stays gone when we come back out of play mode, which is the giveaway. So, see how it's gone now? Position 0, and then when I unplay, it stays at positions 0. That implies that there is a reversion happening and it's not being properly serialized. I guess we'll make this public. Yep. So it turns out that even when you tell it to serialize a field, if it's a protected field, it will revert it to the to whatever your saved variant was. You can't change the protected field in the inspector. That's kind of obnoxious, but what we can do instead is use hide in inspector, because we don't actually need to know those situations, those positions. There's no reason to keep track of them. All we need is that there are 7. The question is whether or not they're still going to be 13 when we hit play. 7 recorded, 7 in scene. What? Okay, interesting. So let's bring that back. Fire. No, it's down to 7 now. What the fuck is going on? Okay, so it appears to be a mark dirty problem. Let's go ahead and see whether or not we can get this to stop failing. In order to fire correctly at the end, you think it would automatically serialize and save, but for some reason it's not marking the particles system here as dirty. I don't remember how to make it mark things as dirty. Game object. It's not really the game. It's a we got one other option here. Let's check and see whether or not running it from here changes things. So there are 24, 24, 24, 24. That's all good. Fire. So now there are 32. 24. Okay. So the problem is the button. Okay. So for some reason, calling the button changes when it gets marked dirty. That is amazing. I can't imagine why it's like that, but I think we can mark it dirty in here. I don't remember how, though. Give me a second here. Unity custom editor mark dirty. Editor utility dot set dirty. There's no fucking such thing as editor utility. There's set dirty. Can I just do it like that? Or is it going to be like, what are you trying to do? There's no fucking thing as editor utility. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay, so now there is. There wasn't, and now there is. Fine, whatever. And only suitable for non-scene objects? What? Well, let's try it. All right, so here is our mesh sprayer. We're going to go ahead. Oh, that's not the right one. With this one. Gonna go ahead and clear it. Hit play, see what happens. Stays as 0. That's all good. So now we're gonna go ahead and fire. Now it's at 8. It's still at 8. Okay, so I don't know what that was talking about, only suitable for non-scene objects, but that seems to have solved it. I don't know why editor utility wasn't visible for a long time. It's strange situation that we've got here, but that's okay. Go ahead and set it up, and then of course we will. I just repeated the process for the other system there. So let's make sure that everything's running, because I've got 2 of these and they have different editors. All right, so now we have particles. Hooray. Okay, so that was fun, and you learned a lot, right? That's why I'm streaming, I'm sure. That's better. So this is a sort of very, very anemic situation. I think we want to really punch it up. So let's bring it so that instead of only firing 8, it fires like 26. And we will really give ourselves a lot of particles and just see how that feels. Now, I don't think these particle engines are the right ones, these particle systems, because these are intended for flat surfaces, and we're kind of trying to inject them into a nook. So we would probably want to go with a different kind of particle system. But the basic idea here is that we want the underside to feel like it's inhabited and organic, like this. What do you think? I think that feels pretty decent. Aside from the fact that the particles themselves don't make any sense, I think if we used a different particle setup, we wouldn't have any problem with it. One of the options we have, of course, is to use 2 different sets. One set of particles for things that are on the ground, and one set of particles for things that aren't. That's not very hard. We might do that. Let's go ahead and, just for now, we'll reset this particle cannon. And I guess we'll go ahead and change the max deploy angle down so that we don't accidentally deploy to the rock itself. This should be pretty much limited to the dirt, because the rock is just too tilted. At least the side of the rock. If we fired at the top of the rock, it would work fine. Alright, since these are supposed to be a flat deploy particle cannon setup, they only have particles that make sense when they're on the flat ground. So what we would normally do is limit ourselves to the planes in which that particular particle setup works, which is what we've done here. So we no longer have the floating elements that were attached to the rock, but that doesn't mean that those floating elements are a bad idea. It just means that we need a different set of particle systems that are specialized for floaty bits instead. It's very, very straightforward, right? Now the problem I've got with this is that it is fiddly work, and I'm not 100% sure that I want to do this in this way. But there are things I could do to sort of help. There's nothing preventing me from having a special version of this where I point it at an object and then that object gets things planted around it. That's not terribly challenging. I just have to build it. So I can create like a leeward planter, a leeward particle cannon. I think that would work great. All I have to do is actually build it. Yeah, so I don't think this is bad at all. I think it's not too shabby. The particle cannon hasn't been pointed quite right. I think that what we've got here is just a problem with the max deploy being a tiny bit too low. Yeah. I'm about to end for the day. My voice is going, and it's been almost an hour and a half or so. If you have any questions, this is your last chance to ask them. I'll be back on Saturday. I'm generally better on Saturdays. But I'm not too disappointed with this. We got to know the new terrain system and its peccadillos. Next time we'll probably do some more level design tools. I need to revamp this rock system. It ain't good enough. The way that we're dealing with this is just not quite good enough yet. Maybe I'll spend like a minute or two fussing around with that. Oh, Pinker said hey. Sorry, I actually looked away and didn't see anybody had talked. Varellen says, long time no see, project looking good. Did you update VS Code today? I told it not to again. It sure likes to update. Pink Hair says that he missed most of this and he likes watching from the start. Well, I'm never a surprise. Sometimes I'll start up to 5 minutes early, but it's never something where I just stream out of the blue. So if we change the noise, we can get a more aggressive pattern out of it, as you can see. I think that might feel a little bit better for this kind of rock, maybe. The only problem we've got is that it's not really a very realistic edge. You can see how it just kind of blorps. Now, the way we were going to fix that is by using edge height like this. And the problem is, as you can see, it creates some artifacting. So I don't use it right now. We can also change the noise threshold, but I think what we really want is I don't know, maybe a more natural set of edges. Second bit doesn't look good, says the Relin. And Pink Hair was trying to get home and couldn't make it in time. So presumably the Relin is saying that the plants here are just awful, which I agree with. We're just going to try and tweak them a little bit. So this is the setup we're using right now. We're using some triplanar broadcasting, I believe. No, we're not. We used to, and now we're not. We're using straight up coral texture here. This is the noise, is it? No, this is the bass. Underlying texture stuff. Triplanar mode. So where is our noise counter? Here it is. Here it is. So basically we have a noise generator. We have two noise generators, and you can see that what we've got here is a noise scale that we multiply the world position by, and then we multiply the world position by 5 here to try and get ourselves some edging out of it. But it's not enough, so we're going to change it to 25. That'll make it really, really aggressive, and we should see a lot of spotches. The problem is that a lot of spotches is not what we want. So what we're going to want to do here is change this noise to a much smaller weight. So we'll just put in our own multiply for this second noise. Here we are. Bring it down like this, and then set this to multiply by 0.2. But that's actually not what we want either. Hold on, because that doesn't end up changing a jack shit. What we actually want to do is add rather than multiply. So we're going to undo that. Just undo it. And bring the steps over. Hello? What's going on? Why are you... That was fucking weird. What we're going to do here is put in an add. Oh, why is it doing this? That's so strange. You don't think the mouse would suddenly stop working, but it does. The Relin says mult by the noise value so it won't raise the edges so harshly. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm going to play around with it a lot later on, but what I wanted was this. Because what I've done is I've made the high grain noise, the noise with a lot of small details, I've made it very tiny. I've made it 20% of the total volume of the noise. And what that means is that it really only affects the edges, which means that we get this slightly more organic spattered look. The only problem is that that slightly more organic spattered look will actually end up causing us even more troubles when we try and raise the edge height, because that is going to end up creating like a million edges. Obviously this edge height's way too much. But bringing it up like this, for example. Another set of the problems is that we actually execute the noises at different times, even though it looks like they're all at the same time, which means that once we have moved these elements away from the surface, they actually count as a different set of noise-related positions, which means that we often get noise that doesn't end up populating correctly. It'll move the texture, or it'll move the mesh, but then it will end up not properly being colored. It'll be colored the wrong way. But this is actually not too bad. We still got some chop, some chatter, but it's not too bad. We can just increase the edge length for most of this, I think. You can see how we still got some crawling. It depends on how close the camera gets. Let's go ahead and see how it looks. The lighting still feels weird, but I don't know. It doesn't feel too bad, other than being the wrong color and having weird, off-putting lighting. I think adding in these edges, these complicated edges, really did help to negate that weird cliff feeling we were getting, because there's no longer any straight lines. I don't know, it feels okay, aside from the fact that it doesn't feel anything like Coral. Well, we can play more with it later. And the Relin, I could make it go up in a slower form, but that would actually defeat the purpose. The idea here is that I want an edge because I want the coral to feel thick. That's the whole plan. Well, I think that's good enough. I will see you folks around. I'm going to take a screenshot or two and then paste them, and then we'll be done. The Pink Hair says it's fine for algae. Yeah, whether it's coral or algae is largely irrelevant at this stage, but it has a weird flavor to it when you get close, and that's because of the parallax we're using, which is interacting a little. See, look at that. You see how as we get closer, the edge lengths change, and we get some jitter. We're gonna have to figure out exactly how we want this to feel. But the point is that I'm going to take a screenshot, and it won't look bad when I'm not moving. But you can see how the lighting, it just does not agree. See how we're shining a light straight ahead, and it's offset. I think that what we're getting is actually just raw world position rather than... I think the coral normal map might be being interpreted wrong. Let's take a quick little look. Here it is. Here's the coral normal map. It's set to be a normal map. I don't know why it's red. Why is it red? That must be what's wrong. Oh, maybe that's it. Let's find out. No, don't do it like that. No, it's set as a normal map here too, and it shows up as blue here. But it shows up as red here. With an alpha. Why does it have an alpha? What's going on? Huh. We do have some like parallax stuff, but it's not involved with the coral normal map at all. Similarly, this isn't involved either. It just pipes straight into the normal map like this. If we take a look at the pattern here, this normal map is blue. Unpack normal map is checked. Maybe I have to check that. What? Wait, hold on. So this is actually a sample. Aha! Ah, there it is. So the problem was that I wasn't using a sample, and I was doing that for complicated reasons I won't go into. Maybe this will make it so the curl doesn't suck. Let's find out. Oh, that already looks better. That already looks way better. Pinker says that normals in Unity always have an alpha. Yeah, it's just something I never really thought about. But the problem was that I was taking normal map's sample, and it was set to be a normal map, but it wasn't set to unpack when I was taking the sample, and that's what was causing these issues. But for now, we can just go ahead and take a little bit of a screeny and call it a day. Well, there's no point in coming back. So I will go ahead and see all of you folks some other time. Saturday if you like, or next Wednesday if you like me when I'm grumpy.